Great. So the second application for struggling learners we looked at was augmented reality. So I know it can kind of sound like a stretch, but I found this article that seemed really interesting and made it sound really doable. So I was going to ask you guys, obviously I would have been doing this in person or virtual at least, but how many of you have heard of Pokemon Go? So I think this was like maybe 5 years ago, but it was this really big hit, and basically you have to like find the Pokemons virtually with your phone, and then I think you like throw something at them to catch them. But it was a really cool way to use augmented reality for like a game. And I just remember this being a really big hit. So the article I found actually at this time was when Pokemon Go kind of had just been released, and the teacher was kind of figuring out how can I involve the interests of my students. So augmented reality is basically just a visual experience in which objects are augmented by computer-generated perceptual information, allowing you to interact with them in a real-world environment. So I have this video. I'm not sure how it's going to play on here, but I'll also drop the link too. But it's basically just a video from the HP Reveal site, and that's like a augmented reality app that this teacher used. So here's a quick video to show kind of how it works. Okay, so I don't want to show like the whole video, but basically the gist is that using that app, you scan an image, so they call it a trigger image, and then the video will start playing immediately once it recognizes that image. So kind of cool. So the benefits to learning for augmented reality, basically the difficulties before, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate to these things, but students with learning disabilities often need a lot of one-on-one time. And especially in the classroom, you know, with multiple students, it's hard to give those students the one-on-one time they need. Also with so many students that we have, it's hard for us as teachers to meet each student's individual needs. So you have the kids that are excelling, that really need the challenge problems. And then you have the lower end of kids who might not even be able to do like the baseline problems. So the benefits of the augmented reality would be it allows students to direct their own learning and become more independent learners. So they can kind of take control of their own learning and they don't necessarily have to wait for the teacher. And it decreases the time that teachers commit to instruction throughout class. So you can kind of think of it like a flipped classroom type of setting, whereas instead of maybe instructing for a whole class period, you instruct once and then kind of let the kids take control from there. And it makes learning more engaging just because, especially like this teacher did, I mean, Pokemon Go is a huge thing at the time. So it's kind of just getting the kids more engaged in what they're doing and being able to interact. Okay, so here's the example. Mr. Kramer was the teacher in the article and he did a unit on ratios. So the biggest problem was that students were mastering the content at different rates, and he was constantly having to review the same steps at different times with each student. So here's the standard. I won't read it to you, but it's right there. It's basically just using ratio reasoning. So the solution that Mr. Kramer had was to use augmented reality so that he would only need to cover the content once. And then if students needed a refresher, if they needed to understand the material more, they could utilize the augmented reality to review the steps on their own throughout class time. So this is kind of what a checklist would look like. And then here are the trigger images that he used. So basically how this would work is the students would be given this checklist, and then, so the first one's read the problem. And then, for example, the second one says find the statement amount. So let's say a student got stuck at this step here, and they're not sure what to do from there. As opposed to waiting for the teacher to come over and answer the question, they would scan this, the number 2 trigger image, and it would pop up with a video on how to do that exact step. So it kind of solves the problem of waiting for the teacher and allows you to determine where you need help. I think it also mentioned there being an image where it would just go through the entire problem with you. So this is broken down into steps. But it just depends, because some students might only need help on like step 4 or just one step of the problem. So it really just depends, and the students can tailor it to their own learning. So I thought this was really cool. And this is just an outcome on one of his students that he had. So Newman, originally he had to be shown a problem multiple times, and he spent a lot of the independent practice waiting for the teacher to come over. So he wasn't really benefiting from the independent practice because he didn't get the one-on-one time he was needing. And with the augmented reality to help him during class, he no longer relied on the availability of the teacher. So he didn't have to wait, ask questions. And his performance in class went up, and he was able to get the help he actually needed. So I think this was really cool. I liked seeing the outcome of a student who really needed this. And then one last thing I have is kind of an alternative for us. So the app that he used, that he talked a lot about in the article, I did kind of some research on it. It's called HP Reveal. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it actually went out of business, I think, around the time of COVID. So it's a free app too, but it's no longer available. And I use QR codes a lot in class. I don't know if anyone does as well, but I kind of came up with this scenario that I thought I might actually use in class because it seems pretty cool. But this is just an example of a systems of equations. So I thought instead of using augmented reality, I know it's kind of different, but this is just, I figured I'd bring it back to something that we could actually do. Here would be the problem, and then I broke it up into 2 steps. So the first one would be write a system of equations to represent this scenario. And then the second would be what is the cost? So pretty much a student could take this first step, and if they were getting stuck there, QR codes can just be scanned with like your camera or even Snapchat or whatever. So they can just scan it, and it could link to like a YouTube video of you explaining how to get the 2 equations here. And then same thing with number 2, if you got stuck there, basically you would scan it and it would show you how to find the solutions. So I thought this would be like a very real alternative that a lot of teachers could use in the classroom. Great for independent practice. And even if you didn't want to do a full explanation, this might be a good way for you to have an answer key and have students check as they go. So I did kind of want to bring it back to something that we could do. I think the augmented reality is really cool, but I don't know how plausible it would be in our schools. So I thought this might be a good option. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And then we're going to do questions, but I'll send it back to Patrick.